Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series. Today, we are going to be covering time off plans, which is a pretty big topic. So I'm going to go quickly and try to cover everything. As a reminder, we do have a chat and a Q&A where we can monitor questions and uh, you know answer those things for you as best we can. If we are not able to cover them today, we can't get to your questions or whatever, we will follow up with you and make sure you get those questions answered. As always, you can always reach out to us, help@criterionhcm.com, with any questions that we don't get to or something that maybe comes up after the fact. So let's jump right in and look at time off plans. So here I am in self-service, and of course, the configuration of it is going to be done in the back end of it. But I did want to show in self-service just very quickly where you might see a time off widget right here showing the available balance as well as how much has been used. So you'll be able to see that right here. And of course, this will show the plans that are set up to this employee. That you may have many plans, but it's going to show what's assigned to that employee. It's also available in self-service right here under My Time Offs. And so they could see those plans that they have, and as well as the time off that they've taken and things like that. They're able to see that right here. And you'll see here, I can make a request for time off here or right there, but we'll get to that hopefully towards the end here. Let me go into the setup so we can talk about how to actually get them assigned to the employees and everything like that. All right, so of course you'll need to come into the back end here to, or I should say the administrative side, to set these things up. Now, there's a lot that goes into the setup of time off plans. We can't just jump into time off plans because one of the very first things we need to do is to set up time off types. And that's going to allow us to say, okay, here's the type of time off, like, for example, vacation, sick leave, PTO. Maybe you say unexcused and excused or something like that. So those are different types of time off. That's what people are going to request, and one or more types can be assigned to a time off plan. So that's going to be configured here under System Configuration Code Tables. And of course, this is a user code table because this is something that you would configure. And let me go all the way down to time off type codes right here. So it is alphabetical. I could have typed in time, and of course, it would come up with anything that matches that. And so you'll see time off type codes right here. Now, I of course already have a whole bunch already configured in my system, but you can see what is going on here. I will go ahead and click on one here. I'm just going to choose vacation because we're going to look at that plan. So here you can see how this is going to be configured. Of course, you need to come up with a code and a description. The code can be the same as the description if you would like. They can both say vacation as an example, or you could do like I did here and do an abbreviation. It could be a number code as well, whatever makes sense for you as the code. The description is what an employee is going to see when they make that request. So they might go out there and request vacation, or you might call it, like I said, unexcused or excused or something along those lines. So that's what that could be used for right there. All right. Now, if you are multilingual, you of course would want to set it in those other languages that are appropriate, French and Spanish and so forth, that you could do right there. All right, so the color code, what that is going to do is on the calendar view, if I look at this on a calendar view, you may have different things here. You'll see the colors over here for the types. So that's going to drive that color right there. This is the hex code, which is something you would need to Google probably to get that right. You can Google hex code for orange or something like that, and it'll tell you what the code is. That's what this is the hex code. It needs to have the hashtag right in front of it. And then the code is always a 6-character code. It could sometimes have letters in it. So just be aware. That's what that's going to be right there. All right. And you'll see the other attributes that are on here, whether this is used for cash out, for comp time. If you're linking it to another type, this is a little bit more advanced, but there are situations where perhaps you have vacation that also counts as family leave or something like that. That's what a linked type would be for. We do have documentation on how that worked. And of course, you can reach out to support or implementation if you need some help on how that would work there. If I go to this, I'll show you where we talk about it. I got to go into my, this will tell you where to go. You go to your help. It'll help you out with that. But basically, you need to set up 2 codes. One being kind of the one that's linked to your family leave plan, and then the one that's also going to be linked to, let's say, your vacation plan or sick leave or something like that. So it is a little bit more advanced. I don't have time to cover that today. And then if you want to hide it in self-service, so it is possible you might set up a time off type that you don't want an employee to select. And so that could be hidden in self-service with that attribute right there. So you'll see those. And of course, what you would do is set up all the different ones you may want to configure in the system before you go ahead and set up your time off plan. So you can see I have a whole bunch of them that are already configured out here. All right, you'll see actually I do have some that are linked here, and they would look like this. It's always 2-digit and then 1-digit for the other linked plan. But we'll talk, you can, like I said, reach out to support on that one if you need some help, or it is in the help there. All right, so once you have the time off type codes configured, you also, if you are using payroll, would want to set up an income code if it is a paid leave, or you want it to at least go through payroll when somebody uses that time off. So you would come into your incomes and you would set up whatever it is you use for this one. I'm going to again pick with vacation, and you would set up your income code with vacation. The code does not need to match up with the time off type. You can do whatever you like here. And of course, the description doesn't need to match up. Probably would make sense if it did somehow match up, but it doesn't have to match up with that. And you'll see the other things in here like cash and pay type and calculation method. The method would need to be hourly because these are hours. And then perhaps if it's unpaid, you would say the rate is 0 and or the multiplier is 0 in there for that. You may include it in overtime. Again, this is all configuration for payroll, so your configuration may vary from what you see on mine. All right, so you can see how that is configured. That's not a requirement if you don't have payroll, of course. You don't have to set that up. I don't believe it's a required field in the time off plans. So let's look at time off plans. And again, I have a whole bunch configured out here. I'll sort them alphabetically so you can kind of see I have a whole slew of them configured. And of course, there are many different configuration for time off plans. I will talk about a couple of them just so you can get a feel for what these look like, because there are, I'll show you like a paid one and an unpaid, and one that's using like non-accrued methods and stuff like that. But I'm going to go into this vacation full-time. Let's talk about this kind of tied into that vacation. So when you create a plan, of course, you do need to come up with a code for it, just like any other setting in the system. We come up with some type of code. Again, it could match the name. So in my situation, you'll see that I could have done like VFT or VACFT or something as the code as well. There's the name that people are going to see when they go to their time off plans. Here you'll notice the time off types. Now this is something that does get locked down once you save the plan for the very first time. So that's why I was saying you need to set up the time off types before you set up your time off plans. If you come up with a new time off type and it needs to be linked to an existing plan, you would have to go through support, or if you're working with implementation to add that to an existing plan. And same thing if you ever needed to delete it. Again, we need to be very careful in a deleting situation, but maybe there was a misconfiguration, you have not used that or something, and you want to get that changed. We can help you with that, but there are certain caveats to that that we'd have to go through, and support and implementation to be able to help you out with that. So that is that. If you wanted to, let's say you just created the plan brand new and you forgot the time off type codes, of course you could delete it and recreate it and have the time off type linked. But once it's created, once you've saved it, this is a read-only field. Same thing with these two fields here, the accrual method and the accrual period. So the accrual method is, how does this accrue? Is it based off of the anniversary date? Is it a fiscal? Is it a non-accruing plan? So it kind of tells you how the calendar works for this and stuff like that. How is the accrual method happening here? The accrual period, you'll see mine is set as monthly. Yours might be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual. Just depends on how you are awarding the time earned if they're accruing the plan. All right, the minimum per request and the request increment, these are two optional fields, but some people have a situation where you have to use a full day, or you have to do it as 1 hour increments or something like that. So you may want to put in here that the minimum request is 1 hour, and the request increments are 1 hour. So if somebody tried to do 30 minutes, it wouldn't work. It would require them to put in 1 hour. When they made that request, it would tell them that they cannot do anything less than 1 hour. Or if they tried to do 2 hours and 45 minutes, again, it would tell them they must do it in 1 hour increments. So you could set these if you would like. If you don't, like mine's blank, somebody could request 1 minute if they wanted to. Any increment of time they could do in there. So that's possible if that's something you need to do there. Let's look over here on the right. So the plan does need to be active to be assigned to employees and to accrue and stuff like that. So you want to make sure the plan is actually active when you want to use it. The potential, that is something that you can show in the admin and in self-service. If somebody would like to see potentially how many hours could I earn in this period, so in this year as an example, they could see that, if all things, kind of go as planned, I'm going to earn 40 hours of vacation or whatever the situation is. What we do is we look at the accrual formula down here, which is a little bit further down, and the accrual period, and we say, okay, for an example, 8 hours every month. So potentially you're going to get 96 hours. All right. Now, that isn't necessarily what they're going to get. Maybe they take a leave of absence and it stops for a period of time or something. It just shows the potential of what could happen there. And of course, if you have a plan that's based off of, let's say, their hours worked or their hours paid, we can't calculate the potential because we don't know what they're going to earn, in the future. So we can't necessarily do that in that. Even though you check the box, it won't work if you have one that's based off of the hours worked or paid. These two settings allow negative and restrict future requests. These, again, are read-only, so I can't change them after I've already set up the plan. But what this would allow you to do is allow you to go, or allow the employee to go negative in their plan. So maybe they earn 8 hours a month, like I have mine, but they're allowed to take all of it up front. So they could take 96 hours in January if this plan started in January, and we allow them to go negative. So that would allow you to do that. There is a setting further down for how far they can go negative. So if you would allow them to go 8 hours negative, you'd want to make sure you check this, allow negative, and then down further, and I'll talk about it, is how far they can go negative. Restricting future requests. What that means is not the future, like I can't take tomorrow off. It's, can I take off or request time off in the next plan year? So, that could lead to issues. As an example, if you're doing a calendar-based one and you haven't established your holidays for the next calendar year, if somebody requests time off in 2025, it will not reflect the holidays and the weekends and stuff like that. So it's not that you can't do it. It's just that you need to be aware of what's going to happen if somebody does request into another calendar year or something like that into the future, that it might potentially cause an issue with a weekend or a holiday or something like that. So if you don't want to worry about that, just leave this unchecked, and they can only do it in the current plan year. Right, all day only. So similar to this minimum per request is when they make a request, it needs to be all day. So there's a setting when I make a time off request that I can enable all day. That's going to look at my hours for the day, and let's say it's 6 hours, and it would be 6 hours for me. Somebody else, maybe it's 8 hours, so it's 10 hours, it's 4 hours. It would be that number of hours, or if I have the plan set up to be a daily accrual, it would be one for me or for whoever made that request. So this would mean you cannot do anything less than a full day. Right. When I make a request, there is a field for notes, and I can choose to make it optional or not. If I don't, if this is unchecked, the note is required. Cannot submit it without a note in a request. All right, override the hours per day. So just like I said with the all day only, it is going to put a certain number of hours there. What if somebody is a variable hour employee? They're part-time, and some days they work 4 hours a day, some days they work 8 or 6. If they check all day, it's going to look at their position and say, it says 8 hours on your position. But if they only really work 6 or 4 or something like that, they may want to change that so they override the all day to say 4 hours or 6 hours or something. So that's what it allows you to do. They kind of work together in a situation like that. If you got a part-timer or somebody who's variable hours, you probably want to check both of these in that situation. All right, hours only. So they can only do hours. They cannot do all day only. So it wouldn't be even an option to do that. They have to put down the number of hours they're requesting. Right, and then the timesheet fields. So showing the timesheet fields means things like project, and task, work location, job, things like that. Whatever's enabled on this person, the employee's timesheet layout, would show up in the time off request. So if you need that, if they need to allocate their time off to projects or locations or something like that, you want to make sure that you check this box. Otherwise, those fields are hidden and then they don't get filled in on the timesheet. Now, if you're not using our timesheets, then it doesn't matter. But if you are, you want to have them allocated to various projects or whatever it is you're doing, then this was important there. All right, now the accrual method here of fiscal, that enables this year-end thing here. If I choose another accrual method, this will be different. But this allows me to tell the system when does my fiscal calendar end and the new plan year begins. So here in my situation, the year ends on December 31st every year. And that's when it would roll over to the next year and determine the carryover and things like that. So if you choose fiscal, you need to put a year end in here as far as when that plan year will end for your employees. If you choose anniversary, this is not an option because it's going to look at the employee's anniversary date. And if I choose a non-accruing method and I want to do, like, say, a look back over the last 12 months or something, there's a different option that shows here. Right, income, as I mentioned, if you're using payroll or you're paying out this time, you're going to want to choose the income code that you would use for that. So once you've set that income code up, you check it off. This is something you can change. So if you forgot, like mine was blank, and I now need to come in here because either I just started using payroll or I forgot and I made a mistake, I can come in here, I can remove it, or I can change the code if I need to. All right, limits. So there are a few different fields here for limits. So the threshold is the most that they can have available for them. So in my situation, you'll see here, I'm 8 hours a month. And so obviously that's going to be like 96 hours per year if they were working the full year. I may say, you know what, you're allowed to carry over 80 hours. So 96 plus 80, well, there's 176 hours. So maybe that's my threshold. If I set one here, I will not be able to accrue once I've reached that threshold. The system will just not accrue for them, and they'll sit there at that threshold until they start using their time, or you do something with your carryover or something like that. So if you're doing like 2 times your accrual or something, you want to put that threshold here. If I leave it blank, they could just keep on accruing and have hundreds, if not thousands of hours banked up in your vacation plan or whatever it is. The accrual cap is how much they can accrue in that particular plan year. So in my situation, I'm doing 8 hours a month. However, I have a cap of 80 hours for the year. So if you think about it, 2 months out of the year, they're not going to accrue time. So this is useful. I know there's some plans where maybe you can accrue up to 30 hours based off of hours worked. And, so this could apply there because if you work full time and you're doing, a certain amount of hours, it might exceed 30 hours. So this allows you to have a cap here. Just like the threshold, if it's blank, it's just going to accrue and keep accruing until there's some type of limit on that there. Here is where you may have a limit. These are 2 required fields. It's how many hours can you carry over from one plan year to the next. And so you'll see here 80 hours as an example is how many hours I can carry over. I had 96 hours. It's going to trim off those extra 16 hours. I'm going to have 80 at the beginning of the next year. All right, those 16 hours are basically lost to the ether if I do have a limit here. I also can put in when those carryover hours would expire. So these 80 hours after 365 days would expire. That could cause a problem because some years there's 366 days. So you would want to make sure if there is no expiration of your carryover, make sure you put 366 or a higher number. Otherwise, those hours will, every 4 years, you'll lose them if somebody carried over some hours. So just be careful with that one if you set a limit. Now, if there's no limit, let's say you set it to 9,999 and nobody's ever going to get there because your threshold is at 80 hours or something, you don't need to worry about it. But these all kind of play together when we're doing the accrual calculations. All right, accruing in advance. So when we're looking at the period right here, where in that period do we accrue? So in advance would mean on the first day of the period. So on the first of the month, I get my 8 hours. If I need to work the entire month and then get the 8 hours, I would leave this unchecked. So in my situation, I would not have my hours for September yet because I do not accrue in advance. I would get them on the first accrual after or on the 30th, or the first one after the 30th of September. And here you'll see I mentioned I could do days instead of hours. So if I was doing days, this would be 8 days instead of 8 hours a month. So if you check this box, this is again one of those settings that is read only once you save, just like this one here. I cannot change it. And then how do you handle that first period that this is assigned to the employee? And a new hire comes on board, they get assigned this vacation plan, and they're eligible right away. What do you do if they start on, let's say, the 10th of the month? Do you prorate, those 20 days in September or whatever? Or, what happens there? So you could say what happens if there is no accrual for September, I would have 0. And then starting in October, I'd start accruing my hours. And here's the accrual formula. Now, this, of course, can be very complex. It usually is a number in here, but as I mentioned, you might do a situation where they accrue based off of hours worked or something like that. So you might see sometimes where there's actual formula in here, but this is a number typically of how much you're going to get in the period right here. So this is very straightforward. It's 8, but you might have one where you say, based off of their years of service, they get 8 hours to start, and then they bump up to 10, and then 12 or whatever. So that would be the accrual formula here. This is, again, where you may want to go into the help to read this stuff, and it was probably set up for you during implementation. But if you're adding a new plan, it'll show you some examples over here. Here's one where you might look at the payroll wages. If I go down, you'll see other things out here. Let me just go down to the formulas. Here you'll see some examples here. Years of service greater than 5. So here let me show you what this would do. I'll put it in here and then I'll explain it. So if years of service, that's what YOS is less than or equal to 5, they get 20 hours in my situation. I'm going to change that to 8. Seems like a lot. If it's less than or equal to 10, let's say they get 12 hours a month. And then if it's less than or equal to 15, they get 30 hours. So you can see how you can change this. Maybe I say 16 hours. And then if it's more than, if it's more than 15, basically they would get 35. So I'll change this to say 20 hours. But I think you can see how this one works. YOS is years of service, and that's what it's doing. Less than or equal to 5, less than or equal to 10, less than or equal to 15. And this now years, of course, might be completely different. Maybe it's quarters of service. As I mentioned, maybe it's based off of their hours worked or something like that. So you might have a different formula in here, or it might be like my old one was, which was just 8 hours. Now, this is the amount they'll get every period. So in monthly, that's what they'll get. Let's say you know that you should be getting 80 hours a year. You might put in 80 here, but then you need to divide it by, let's say, 12 for a monthly to get that monthly one. Otherwise, you're going to get 80 hours every month, which is not what you want probably. So you want to probably, if you're going to put in the total hours they'll earn in a year, divide by the number of periods that are up here. So biweekly, you divide by 26 as an example, or semi-monthly by 24, quarterly by 4, etc. All right. The last one before I go into the enhanced settings is your description of your plan. So if you need to put in a description of what this vacation plan is, you could do that right here. This is not a requirement. All right, let's talk about a couple of things up here. This little gear is some enhanced settings. And you'll see here we have a couple of things. So first off, you might say that they need to request time off on a holiday. I've seen that situation where they don't get paid for every holiday, or they don't get paid for holidays, but they accrue maybe a floating holiday or something like that. And so if it is a holiday, they need to request time. So that would allow the system to record a time off request on a holiday based off of the holiday calendar. All right, if they're on an LOA, do you want to allow this plan to be accrued on the LOA? Now, there is a field in there where you can say to stop accruing after a certain date. But if this box is checked and that date is not filled in on the leave of absence, it will accrue time as normal. Right, and then you'll see here payout on termination. So you have a vacation plan, a paid time off, etc., that you need to pay out upon termination. You'll want to check that box right there. And then what happens is in payroll, there is a thing under the import button to load the time that needs to be paid out. So we would look for any terminated employees in that period, find out what their available balance is, and bring those hours over into payroll and say, okay, we need to pay out this person 45 hours of vacation or whatever the situation was. So that's what this is in here. This is a relatively new setting. So you may want to review your time off plans and check this off if it's appropriate. We can help you out and support if you have any questions on how that works. All right, here's some formulas for eligibility, effective date, and waiting period. This is similar, not exactly the same, as the formula for accruals. So you might say that, you know what, they are not eligible until they've worked for 90 days. So you might need to say days of service greater than 90. That'd be DOS instead of YOS for like years of service. You might say DOS greater than 90. So that means they're not eligible until 90 days to actually have this plan. The effective date. So maybe you can assign it to them when they're hired, but the plan doesn't start for a certain amount of time. So you don't need to necessarily worry about the eligibility. This will change the effective date of that plan to be, let's say, 90 days. And maybe they start accruing right away, but they cannot use it for a certain amount of time. So they can't use their time off for the first 6 months. You might put in here months of service is 6 or days of service is 180 or something like that. That's the waiting period. It means they cannot request time within that period of time. All right. So a lot going on in a time off plan, and that's just one. Let me show you just very quickly a non-accruing plan, just so you can see what this looks like. This is for our US clients, an example of an FMLA or Family Medical Leave Act plan. All right, so you'll see some things in here that are a little different when you use a non-accruing plan. First off, you'll see include closed days. So you could include the weekends in here if you would like. All right, you could include holidays if you want to do that. Here you'll notice there's a period type. Now this is does have some other options in here. So let me just show you those options on a non-accrual one. You can, like say for an FMLA, look backwards or forwards or base it off of a calendar. So you might need to look back 12 months of a rolling period for how much FMLA they've used. So that would be a period backward. All right, so you may need to do that right there. So that's an option there. I'm not sure why this one said calendar year, but it's an example there. Otherwise, you'll see here, what I've done is you could put in a maximum request. So you may want to say that they can only request a certain amount of hours, and they're only allowed to take a certain number per year. So, FMLA is 12 weeks in a rolling 12-month calendar. So you may say, 12 times 5 and put down, the total number of hours and stuff like that. So you put down 12 weeks times 5 times 8 and put a number in there. So that would mean that they cannot make a certain number of a certain request more than a certain number within that 12-month period of time. It would stop them from using that in there. So it is a little different. You'll notice there's no accrual formula here because it's not an accruing plan. But a lot of the other settings are the same in here. The only difference is we're not accruing time, so we're just tracking the time off used. Let's look at assigning this to the employees. I've got a couple more minutes here, so I'm going to quickly look at assigning it, and I'll assign it to Ted so you can see what it looks like on him. So if I go to Ted, under benefits, I have my time off plans. All right, and he's got 2 that are right here. Now, one thing to note is when you're assigning plans to people, we do look at that time off type code. And we say, you cannot have 2 plans that are active with the same time off type code. So you may remember I had a vacation full-time and a vacation part-time. Perhaps they were both using the same time off type of vacation. I would not be able to add vacation part-time because I've already assigned vacation full-time in here. All right, so not sure why it's not showing up there, but it's probably not showing up because either he's not eligible or I've assigned all the ones that correspond with what's here. So I would not see vacation part-time because he already has vacation full-time right there. And same thing with sick. Perhaps there's multiple time off types in there, and the other ones I will not see. So just be aware of that. If you go to assign it for the first time to somebody, you can actually select them both, but only one will be assigned. So if I selected both vacation full-time and part-time, and then I hit OK, it would not allow me to assign them both. I would have to pick one of them. All right. So that, just be aware that if you have like a PTO plan and something like that, and they both have the same time off type codes. Now, the only caveat to that is those linked time off plans. So if you do have a linked time off plan between sick leave and FMLA, it will allow you to do those because it's coming out of both balances. So that's how that would work there. All right, so let me just click into here so you can kind of see this information. So here's the plan, the start and end date. Obviously, it's been a little while since I've accrued on him because it's showing 2021, but it is showing all this stuff. Let me accrue. I'll just accrue to today. And what's going to happen is it's actually going to go through, do all of 21, 22, 23, and I'll have a new plan out here that has 24. All right, so you can see how now it's there. There's the accrual date. It's accrued or carried over 80 hours. You may remember that in my setting, it said 80. And he's accrued 64. So because they're 9 months in, or 8 months in times 8 per, because it was end of the month, 64. After, if I accrue in October, I'll get my 8 hours for September. I haven't used any, and I haven't expired any carryover. I would need to be careful. If I accrued on December 31st, this carryover would expire because this uses the leap year. So be aware of that. So you'll see 80 plus 64 equals 144 because I have 0 used. Now, there are a couple neat things here. I could make an adjustment. So perhaps I needed to change the accrual or the carryover for a person. I could do that in here. So I might need to give them some additional hours or something like that. Sometimes that happens. Maybe I've seen where there's like a raffle and somebody earns 40 hours of vacation in a raffle. So you might do that as an adjustment. You'll notice that the reason is a required field because we keep track of that in the accrual log. So if I was to give this person, this here, and I give them 40 hours, you'll see here, I'm adjusting it to a time or a period before my last accrual date, which was today. I do October or August 30th. Just letting me know that I may want to say, oh yeah, you know what, let's put it to today. All right, and I'll say won the vacation raffle and save. Okay, so now I come down here and my accrued is 80. You know why it's 80? Because I have an accrual cap of 80 hours. So that's why 64 only went to 80 because I have an accrual cap. You'll actually be able to see that in the accrual log. If you show this, it'll, I don't know if it's going to go on this the report there. It did not. Let me open this report and just so you can see what that looks like here. Okay, so here you'll see all the accruals for each month, and you'll notice it's the end of the month for each month as we go along. Here is won the vacation raffle 40, but then there's the auto adjust to the accrual cap of minus 24. So I cannot override the accrual cap by doing an adjustment. It'll still cap out at 80. All right, so this accrual log is going to be very useful if you ever need to figure out what happened with how many hours did they earn. Extremely useful if you're doing one where they're earning based off of their hours that have been paid, because then you see how much they got each pay period. All right, it also shows the liability. That's based off of his hourly rate. So 6250 times his balance, and that's where the 5,000 comes out. All right, so now, of course, I might want to record time off on there. So this is where I could do it through the admin side. I can come in here and say, I need to put some time off for Friday. I'll make it all day as an example, and I'm going to do vacation. So this was going to look at his position and see that he gets 8 hours per day, I'm assuming. So it'll do 8 hours. If I would like to override that and put in 8 hours or some other number, I could do that there. You'll notice I don't have to put the start time in if I choose all day. Those two fields become grayed out. But I'm just going to say day off here. The note, remember, was required. So I have to put that, and then I'll save this. Okay, so there's that there. And then over here in self-service, if I go back to my other view, there's my vacation, 152 hours. There's my 8 hours in the future. And if I want to do a time off request, I could do that through here. Choose my vacation. It shows me I have 152 hours. Let's do Monday all day and day off again. Now, the one thing I didn't cover on this is the workflows. If you do want to have it go to, let's say, their manager or somebody like that, or more than one somebody's, you would want to set up a workflow for that. We do have training videos on workflow configuration, but that's why this one says submission. If I add it through Here, it's automatically approved. But when I added it through self-service, it requires somebody to approve it. All right, so I appreciate everybody who was able to stick around the extra time today for time off. I don't know if there was any questions. Hopefully, if there were, they got answered. If you do have additional questions, of course, you can reach out to support, but let's go ahead and look at our future learning series out here. So you should be able to see here our upcoming learning series webinar. We're going to take one session off in 2 weeks because we're going to be at HR Tech, which is a big HR conference out in Las Vegas. So maybe we'll see some people there. Hopefully we do. If you do stop by our booth, I don't recall right off the top of my head where we're at. So maybe I can look it up real quick. But you'll see 2 weeks after that, the first one in October is going to be covering forms. So if you are interested in forms and how they work, you'll see that right there with the forms on October 10th. Then we're going to cover question sets. That is going to be a very interesting one because we have had a number of changes on question sets over the last few releases, including some that are coming up in the release. That's going to be right around that time frame. So you're going to be able to see some stuff that won't be releasing until a day or two later. So we'll actually train on that then. And then we're going to move into our year-end payroll year-end stuff. So first off, we're going to start off with the US on November 7th. So we'll talk about year-end processing and W-2s and stuff like that. And then we're going to talk about Canada. A couple weeks after that, we'll talk about, of course, the T4 and how you do that. And then we're going to revisit it for our US folks because not everybody's able to attend in November. So maybe not top of mind yet because it's still a couple months out. So December 5th. And then 2 weeks after that, we're going to cover Canada again. So we're not forgetting you guys. So that's what's available coming up here. I did want to mention again, HR Tech. If you happen to be going to HR Tech, I found out our booth 3089. So stop by and say hi. I'll be there as well as a few of our other people that are on our sales team, and Sunil will be there if you want to meet our CEO. So I hope to see people out there. And otherwise, I will see you all in about a month. So thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. And as always, you can reach out to us at our help right there or reach out to your business partner if you have any further questions. Thanks again.